All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the second event in our Refugees in Focus series. I'm Sarah Christine, the Executive Director of the Fund for Refugee Initiatives and the host for today's event. Now, a little bit about the Fund for Refugee Initiative. We're an organization that provides grant funding and technical assistance directly to early stage refugee-led organizations. We are hosting these events every month with a different topic and guest, during which you will hear from humanitarians, researchers, our team members, and refugees. Now, quick housekeeping for today's event. I'll leave about 5-10 minutes at the end of our conversation with our guest today for questions from you all. So if you have questions as we go, please type and enter your questions into the chat feature of the webinar. And during the last 5 or 10 minutes, we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can. Now, today we are talking with refugee, author, leader, father, husband, friend, the list goes on, Innocent Magambe. A refugee from birth, Innocent spent the first 27 years of his life in refugee camps in Eastern and Southern Africa. He founded the organization There Is Hope, which we'll learn more about today. In 2015, he wrote his memoir titled Refugee for Life. And in 2020, the African Diaspora Network awarded Innocent Builders of Africa's Future Award in recognition of his organization's effort to address issues affecting Africa. So without further ado, super excited to welcome my new friend and colleague, Innocent Magambe. Innocent, hello, welcome, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to talk and to share my story.
Yeah, well, thank you for being with us. So you are joining us from your home in Lilongwe, Malawi. Is that right? The capital of Malawi?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So it is your evening. It's morning for a lot of us on this call. And yeah, just super excited to speak with you today. I know we have a lot to cover, so we'll do our best. So Innocent, first, I want to start at the beginning with you. So as I mentioned during the introduction, a refugee from birth, 27 years in refugee camps. If you could just, I don't know, give us a bit of kind of an overview or take us through, what early life looked like for you. What was it like, growing up in refugee camps?
Thank you, Sarah. I mean, growing up in the refugee camp, first of all, as a kid, I didn't know that I was a refugee until, maybe when I was 4, 5, and, you step on someone, they are like, okay, go away, you foreigner. And I'm like, okay, what does it mean to be a foreigner? So I went to my parents, I asked them, what does it mean? I thought I was home. And they're like, no, we are from Burundi and, this is not home. So I was so curious and, I asked so many questions to my dad because when, maybe when I was 1 year, according to what I'm told, that my dad and mom separated, so I didn't see much of my mom. So it was just my dad and my siblings, and I was the youngest. So it was really hard to know that you have a home, but you have no access to it, and there's limited freedom in a place that you were born. But when I was 13, we went to Burundi for the first time, but we only stayed there for 3 months because the civil war broke up again and we had to run away. We came to Congo. In Congo, after 3 years, the war started in Congo. I was on the run. I was 16. I ran alone. I went to Zambia. From Zambia, tried to really find an opportunity to study because I thought education is something that will change my life and help me to change lives of many. I didn't know where my siblings were, my father, and it was really difficult to be alone in Zambia when I was 16 years old. But 2 years later, I got to hear that my siblings were in Tanzania, in the refugee camp in Tanzania. So through Red Cross and United Nations High Commission for Refugees, they did family reunification, and they transferred me from the refugee camp in Zambia to Tanzania, where I finished my high school because I had to stop my education. But then when I finished my high school, I started teaching. But in the refugee camp in Tanzania, there were laws and laws of conflicts because it was near the border with Burundi. So the rebels would come and recruit young people to take them to the front line. Although fighting injustice was one of the goals of my life, but I didn't want to do it through guns. So that's how I came to Malawi and became a refugee in Dzaleka.
So, I mean, so that's a lot. And so, Innocent, I want to kind of maybe break that down, because what does it even look like and feel like to be a kid and a youth, you know, making these decisions, moving around? Are you moving around with other people? Are you walking by foot, taking buses and traveling to other countries and camps? I mean, what does that even kind of, you know, look like for people who don't understand?
Yeah, I mean, the simple way to break it down is, you know, when adversity does not kill you, it can form you. So I was formed by adversity, and you just grow up so quickly.
Yeah.
And you need to take a decision because there is nobody else to take a decision for you. I mean, in the Congo, when the war in Congo started, my dad did not want to run away. He said, I've done my part. You know, I was well-to-do in Burundi, and I had to leave everything and came to Congo, started all over again. I will never go back into another country. I'll stay here, die here, or go back and be killed there. So he didn't want. And as a last born, he wanted to protect me. He wanted me to be with him, but I was so afraid. I was so scared because I only had two options as a young man, was either to run away or to join the militia. Because when you join the militia, at least you have a protection because you have a gun and you have a troop that is looking over you. But I didn't want to do that. So the option was to run. So I had to take decisions alone and took action.
And when you were moving from camp to camp, were you attending school during those years?
No. So it was hard. When I tell people that I didn't go to college when I was 24, like starting my college, some people are like, wow, that's the time many of us finish, you know, a master's degree, you know. But that's when I got the opportunity to go into the camps, into the school. So I just had to interrupt and continue again, and it was hard, but I was determined to be educated because I knew that was the only way that I could make a difference in this world.
Yeah. And do you think that's kind of the experience of a lot of refugee youth and children, right? In and out of school, and facing a lot of barriers to accessing school within camps.
Yes, I mean, the barriers that refugees face, it's not just school, it's almost everything. And unfortunately, many give up on the way. And just especially girls, they are more vulnerable because whatever needs they have to trade it with their bodies. And unfortunately, they'll be pregnant or attract HIV. And it's really hard, but it's the life of many people.
Yeah. So then you end up in the Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi. Is that correct?
Yes, that was 2003. And while there, I still believed that an opportunity for me to study will come, but I didn't know where and when it will come. So I stayed, you know, waiting. And while waiting, I saw an American pastor who was leading a local church in Lilongwe, in the capital. He was from Mississippi. You know, he came to visit the camp, and I saw this tall African-American guy. I'm like, wow, that guy looks cool. So I just approached him. I say, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm a pastor in Lilongwe, and we are trying to help refugees. I'm like, I'm here, help me. So I remember him asking me the question, like, what do you want in life? I always knew what I wanted. I wanted education. So I told him, he says, okay, I don't have anything now, but I'll pray for you and let's keep in touch. He prayed for me and he left. Soon after a year, the church got me out of the refugee camp. Okay. They sent me to a college in Lilongwe. While at the college, that was my first time to be outside of the refugee camp and to interact with the people where I was the minority. I was the only refugee in the whole campus. I felt like, this is too good to keep to myself. And that's where the idea, the vision to start There Is Hope, so that I can give an opportunity to
No, it's okay.
To people like
who
have never left the camp, to experience life outside of the refugee camp.
Yeah, now you're gonna make me cry. And so, at what age? I mean, at what age were you now attending school and education when you had the opportunity to leave the camp and go to school?
I was 27.
27. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. And I mean, again, if you could you give us a little bit more, also just like a little insight into what life was like in the Dzaleka camp, because I think it's always difficult for people to imagine, what it is to be a refugee, what it feels like, and what it feels like to live in a camp. Just curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there are some drawn pictures of Dzaleka when it had really grown, and the pictures were taken about 2-3 years ago. The place is congested. There is no breathing room. People are on top of each other. When one house catches fire, it's disaster for many houses around. People, they have so many talents. The entrepreneurs, they are dancers, they are just name it. But they're restricted to operating in the refugee camp. So you can have talent, but it will die because you don't have a place to show it and exercise it. So, and sometimes, for a long time, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has been struggling to raise money to feed refugees. So they have been receiving half ration. I mean, full ration itself is not good enough. I'll think about half ration. So again, talking about how vulnerable women and girls become, because when you run out of food, you just have to trade your body with men who are able to sneak out to the refugee camp and work or do business, and it just becomes difficult. However, people are resilient and they push. If you get to the camp, you see almost everyone is running up and down, trying to trade, trying to do something. And the locals also come into the refugee camp to buy and sell things. So there is movement of money. But we try to really expose the talents that refugees have and the potential that they have to change and contribute to the economy of the country.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned the energy, because I think people have a perception of refugees that they are kind of this passive recipients of aid, right? That they're individuals who are kind of just waiting for help, when it's on the contrary, right? It's a community of people who are so energized, working so hard to rebuild their life, and who are just looking for opportunity to do so. And I do want to talk about, you mentioned the food rations as well, to put in perspective. You mentioned the half the food rations, and just to give people some context, I mean, from my experience in working in other refugee settings, half of food rations might last a family a week and a half, right? And so, it's not a whole lot, right? So then that leaves families who have 3, 4, 5, 6 children struggling and to figure out how to make up for that gap in food rations.
It is. I mean, full ration in Dzaleka, you have to eat it for 1 month.
Yeah.
And if you eat, lunch and dinner, you finish your food within 2 weeks and a half.
Yeah.
So now, if people think that to be a refugee means to be lazy and not use your hands, what will become? People will die. So you have to get out your hands and really try and, hustle. And yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us about There Is Hope. How did it come to be? What's the mission?
Yeah, so There Is Hope started as an organization that supports uniquely refugees to really support, because we started as trying to help the girls, single mothers and widows, to really help them find an income so that they can really live a dignified life, use their bodies with dignity and not because they're forced by anything. So that's what we started, and slowly we added more projects, and now it has become a very big organization that supports refugees and the host community to live a life that they are able to, to make money, to make a living out of what they do. So we discovered that there were a lot of animosity between refugees and the local communities, because the locals were like, okay, refugees are foreigners in our land, and yet they are attracting all the Ed community, all the Wazungu, which means white person. And they became like resentful. So we thought, okay, the only way to unite them is to include them in our agenda. So we bought a piece of land and we built our center. So now we are providing vocational training, and the majority of our clients are Malawians, and which, it's a way of advocating for refugees, because everyone knows that There Is Hope was started by refugees. Now you have hundreds of Malawians benefiting from the work of a refugee, and that helps us to integrate and get a voice and sit at the table and be invited. Otherwise, in the past, they used to ignore us and just think that we are just nonsense. But today, we have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I want to ask you a little bit about the beginning of There Is Hope, because as a funder of refugee-led organizations, we do focus on early stage organizations because we know how difficult it is for them to get recognition and access to resources. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the beginning of There Is Hope. I mean, how did you guys get that going? Where did you get your financing from? What were the barriers to starting the organization?
That's a very long story. I mean, people would see it. They can read more in Refugee for Life. But, I started just with passion, without training. And to me, I feel like passion is really great. Of course, training is also important. But most of the time, there are so many people who have talent, but they don't have passion. And when they serve refugees or when they do anything that they do, you see that there's something that is lacking. So I started just, I felt like within me, I'm a believer. I felt like God was speaking to me to start an organization, and it was too heavy for me, because I felt like I am still a refugee. I don't even have a bank account to, my name. Yeah. Who will trust that, if you put money, resources in the hands of innocent, the money will do exactly what it's meant to do? Who will even come and work with me? I don't have any experience. It was in my first year of college. But the passion was so great that I couldn't hide it or, do anything without, surrendering to God and say, I will do it. So I started, and I remember this American, again, my story is full of many Americans who came alongside and supported, which is really great. She was from a church, and she was, a volunteer in Malawi, and she said, Innocent, I'll give you the first step. And she got me, 23 Bibles in Kinyarwanda language, and I took them to the refugee camp, and that was my first funding, just from this one woman who gave me these books. And then there was a couple that came from Hawaii. They were retired, and they came, and they were like, okay, let's work together. And they had a newsletter. I didn't know what newsletter meant, and they wrote the story of There Is Hope, and people started giving money, and that's how we started.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I love that, because so I'll give a little context. You and I met because I reached out to you looking for support in identifying and supporting organizations in the Dzaleka community. And I had come across There Is Hope we had a conversation, and I was honest with you. I said, I think your organization is too big, too far advanced in terms of the type of organizations that we're looking to support. And I knew that you would likely be disappointed, but you received that news with such grace, and you said to me, it's okay, what can I do to help you support and find other groups in the Dzaleka community? And I felt, it was so striking to hear you say that. And you were right. You followed through. You helped me identify, I think we identified 16 groups in the community. You reached out to them. You did a survey on our behalf. And because of you, we've identified and are now funding a group in the Dzaleka refugee camp community. So I want to ask you, what is it that drives you to want to ensure that other groups, other refugee-led organizations are also receiving that recognition and support?
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, the work with refugees, to me, it's a calling because, I have told my story many times, many times in different continents, but every time that I think about it, tears come because they're still as fresh as if they happened yesterday. So when I walk in the refugee camp, I feel like I'm walking home, and everyone younger than me is my young brother and my young sister. Anyone older than me is my brother and my father. So I want the best for them. From the beginning of There Is Hope, I knew that one day, There Is Hope will be led by someone else who is not me. And that's exactly what I've been doing. So I've been training my successor for the past 4 years. So it was just last month that I stepped down from There Is Hope when my successor was ready enough to take over. She's a woman and she's a Malawian. And so I want now to dedicate my time to help people who are still where I used to be with There Is Hope, because I know how important they are. Grassroots, they are driven by passion. If you think of UNHCR, people who work in the refugee camp, that's their office. But the grassroots leaders, that's their home.
Yep.
Now, someone, working from home and working from the office, looking after the people in the home, it's so different. At night they get, knocks and says, come, I need bread, I am hungry, or my husband just beat me, or I'm facing this trouble. And those leaders, they get up and support. So they work 24 hours.
Yeah.
How can I say no to any support that is targeting them to help the community? That's what my passion is.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. So powerful. And that's why we feel so fortunate to be able to work with you in our work in Dzaleka. And so you did mention that you have transitioned out of being the executive director of There Is Hope. I know that this has been, a big transition for you the past few weeks. So can you talk to us a bit about that? How has it felt to shift out of that role? And do you have any sense of what you want to do next?
Yeah, it's hard. I have prepared this for many, many, many years, even in my mind, because it was just a matter of finding the right person. So the right person came 5 years ago. And when I saw her, I was like, okay, I need to invest in her. But the preparation started many years ago. But it's still really, because the friends, like the staff of There Is Hope, we had over 43 staff members. They became family members.
Yeah.
These are people that I have spent many years together and I talked to. And so leaving them just felt like I was leaving my family, but I thought it was important and necessary. So it was hard. But another part that was really hard was receiving questions from people, especially my siblings. They thought that, it was just crazy as a founder and executive director just to leave an organization at a point where it has reached a point where it can now feed me or support me and my family and everyone, give me a good check for a salary. And they were like, how? Like, are you going to be getting a salary even as a retired executive director? I'm like, no, I don't even get a salary now. Yeah. My wife and I work as volunteers. We have to raise funds just like other volunteers, missionaries elsewhere. This was just deliberately so that we are truthful in what we are doing. And there were so many people really disappointed, and because there's no culture of transition. But I guess I'm getting used to it, and people they have seen that I'm serious, and they have stopped asking. So now I have really clarity. I really want to start a company, an advisory company, like a consultancy company, where I'll be supporting the grassroots, like the grassroots leaders. On my priority. Like I need to support them. So because they are not able to pay for my services, I'll be, looking and reaching out to people like you, Sarah, to say, you kindly help me provide a service to these people so that they grow their capacity. Because again, they have passion, but they are lacking in terms of training. So this is what I want to be doing, but also, give inspirational talks to students, to girls, to different people, because using my story, I think it has many layers that will change someone's perspective or encourage someone. But also, I want to be training the church leaders. I mean, 84% of the world population identify themselves as people with faith. And in Africa, especially in the rural areas, the church has a big influence. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of disparity between girls and boys. So I really want to invade the faith space, to train leaders to see that development we cannot attain it if we still put down the girl child. Using stories in the Bible to try and help them see and hopefully lead the advocacy of girls in the communities. Those are things that I'm really thinking of doing.
Amazing. Well, I mean, it's great to hear you mention the consultancy, because you have already been doing a little bit of that work for the Fund for Refugee Initiatives. Innocent has been a mentor for the organization that we're funding. They're called Green Uhuru. And I know that they've messaged me, letting me know that you've been an invaluable support and help to them in helping them with their leadership and their transparency and their financial management. So thank you. I don't know. I do want to end on maybe one or two questions. First, I guess maybe speak to maybe the title of your book. So you can purchase your book on, I believe, on Amazon or on your website. And Refugee for Life. I mean, it's a powerful title, and I'm just curious as to kind of why you landed on that and what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, it means that although I may no longer be a refugee, I mean, I have aspiration to be part of the leadership of my country, Burundi, or, Africa. But wherever it will be, the experiences that I've learned, the lessons I've learned as a refugee will never depart from me. So I'll always be a refugee for life.
Okay. And so and when you say you aspire to be the leadership of Burundi, does that mean one day you might decide to return to Burundi?
Absolutely, yes. I'm just waiting. I don't know when, I don't know how.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem of living by faith. But I know that when time is right, my heart will tell me, and I'll move with my family.
Okay. Well, thank you, Innocent. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I know that you have a lot going on. If people want to know more, there is in the chat box there his website. There is hopemalawi.org. You can also find his book on the website. And if you send us an email, team@fundforrefugeeinitiatives.org, also happy to connect you to Innocent directly, because he's an inspiring leader and individual. And Innocent, we, on behalf of the Fund for Refugee Initiatives, we thank you for your partnership in the work that we're doing. Again, we would not have found, the organizations and connected with the refugee leaders that we have if it weren't for your support and partnership. So we thank you for that. And I look forward to more collaboration in the future. Hopefully.
Thank you.
So for all of you who attended, thank you so much. And we hope to see you next month for our next Refugees in Focus. And thanks again, everybody. Have a good rest of your Friday.
Thank you. Bye.
you.